we will tell you about the FAA audit. So I'll go first, and then Charlie gets to add his piece. This is a fun story. So some of you have probably already been contacted directly by the FAA. Our good friends Juan and Tim, and they are the lead agents or examiners on the inspectors, whatever you want to call them, the guys on the auditing and Agri, we had our audit in January. We passed with some revisions, but what they will do is they will want to see all of your documentation of licensure, your exemption, the manuals, making sure that you know your manuals and exemption, making sure all of that plays nicely together, as well as registered aircraft and certain pieces like that. And I think it's worth mentioning that they are not here to break down your door. They're not here to be nasty unless you're being blatantly just disrespectful and definitely trying to do bad things. So if you're willing to learn, if you're willing to have a conversation, they're great guys. They have very good, a good conversation. But I will say that they will ask you questions that are very tailored to their experience. And that's not a bad thing at all. That's, Juan has a background in aircraft maintenance, and he is used to working on large fixed wing aircraft, which is fine. And so he's going to ask you about your maintenance logs. He's going to ask you about your maintenance manuals. He's going to ask you about all of those things. And Tim will go, they'll both go through the whole thing. Anything that you put in front of them, they are going to read. And so if you don't want them to read something, don't put it in front of them. They're going to ask for it. But if you do it, expect that. Another piece that was kind of a duh moment for us is I would like everyone to reach in their wallets and get their Part 107 license out right now. Make sure the back of it is signed. So everybody check your remote pilot certificates. Make sure the back is signed, because legally it is not an official license until you endorse it. So we had a couple of pieces with that, and like I said earlier, the Drone Operations Center is a response to those audits. And so if you truly follow the steps that we give you, if you follow your exemption and you log everything the correct way, you have nothing to worry about. The other piece is that if you're willing to learn, that goes a long way with that. Charlie's experience was a little bit different. And so, Charlie, if you'd like to talk about your experience with the audit with our friends.
I give you the nutshell, but I hear it over and over again every time I'm somewhere where the FAA is there and they're talking to spray pilots. Uh, know your exemption, know your manuals. Those are the two things that they are going to ask for. They're not going to, like Alex said, they're just wanting to confirm compliance. If you've never looked at your registration and flipped it over to read the back of it, to start taking the time to read what the documents say. I mean, Alex tells you that you will need to make sure that you sign your pilot's license. When it came in the mail, it was stuck to a card that said, "This is not valid unless you sign it." Everybody's like, "Oh, look at my license," and threw it in their wallet and never signed it. Uh, there's 47 conditions and limitations on the current exemption. There's 33 for those of you who've had an exemption for probably 8, 9 months. There's 46 condition limitations on those who are stuck in the middle. But those are the only 3 exemptions that are out there. Guess who knows those 3 numbers? The FAA does. They know which exemption is which, and they're going to ask to see yours. They're going to want to see your manuals. They're going to flip through your manuals and ask you random questions. It's going to say it says right here that you do this training. Show me a document that proves that you've done this training. It says right on your 137 in your exemption that you'll self-test. They're going to ask for that test. As Alex said, don't lay anything out that you're not ready to defend. They showed up at my house, and this was when I was not at work for Agri at the time, to do a random 137 inspection. I personally hold the 137, and I hold an exemption for under 55 pounds and over 55 pounds because that's how I test, going through the system. If I can get it done, I do it to myself, and then I can do it for my customers. Uh, so they randomly came to my house to do an inspection. This is a 137 that would never been used. Yes, I have it, and I laid it all out on the table. Uh, I'm not one to tell you what licenses I have, but I have an airline transport pilot license. I have a airframe power plant license. I have a flight instructor license. I've got an inspection authorization license. I laid them all out on the table. I had my medical on the table. I gave them my manuals for under 55 and over 55, and I said, "Let's talk, guys." And they had just come from Agri Spray, and they'd come from a couple others, and they wanted to tell me what they thought of the manuals, and I'm like, "Wait a minute, says right here in my exemption that I have to have manuals and they need to have these 6 or 7 things. That's it. You don't have to like my manuals." I said, as long as they meet the requirements of my exemption, they're good. And we did this for 2.5 hours. Uh, they did have some opinions on what they liked, but at the same time, they wanted to see maintenance manuals. DJI at the time doesn't publish a maintenance manual. I as a pilot or an operator can't write a maintenance manual. If I was operating an aircraft, I have to comply with the manufacturer's maintenance manual. And we had those discussions. The more educated you are on what you have, the better those discussions are. Uh, they're asking about data that's in your manual, or they don't like this or don't like that. That's fine. You have it. Whether they like your training logs or not, it just says you have to have log training. It doesn't say how to do it. It says you need to be able to show currency. The FAA defines logging of flight time as a reliable record. If you put all your flight time on a roll of toilet paper and that's your reliable record, that's a good logbook. The guy that's standing there looking at it might not like it because it's on a roll of toilet paper, but it is a reliable record. Uh, and it seems like semantics, but that's really, as an operator operating a drone business, need to be that versed in what your exemption says, what FA 137 says, because 137 is a number, and we all have a certificate that says we have a 137 operating certificate, but there's a whole rule base in 137. We took a test about 107, and most of it doesn't apply. And I say that because your exemption overrides the 107. Just, the nutshell things. 107 says I can fly up to 400 feet. My exemption says I can only go to 200 feet. You need to know that well enough to know that what the FAA is going to say when he's there, because he might not know one or the other. He might be very versed on 107 and not very versed on your exemption, but you need to know the difference. 107 says a drone can fly up to 100 miles an hour. My exemption says I can only fly 30 miles an hour. I used to not be able to fly at night, even though 107 said I could. I get the phone call all the time. Why do I have to have a medical? Because your exemption said you had to have a medical. It's nowhere written in a regulation that you have to have a medical to fly a drone. It was a condition and limitation in your exemption. Uh, and if your buddy says you don't have to have a medical, that might be his exemption. What's your exemption say? So really know your exemption and be able to defend it. Uh, it was not a controversial type exchange. It was about 4 hours total. They just wanted to know how I was complying in my operation, same as when they went to Agri Spray. Uh, let me see, let me see what your registration looks like. Let me see your pilot's license. Let me see your medical. Let me see your manuals. Let's talk about what it is. What have you done for currency? It's not a daunting thing, other than the fact that they're coming in to do an inspection, and that's what they're there for, is just looking for compliance. They're there to educate, not violate. If they see something they don't like, there's going to be findings, and the findings are, show us what you're going to do to get yourself in compliance. And they're pretty laid back about it. If you're stiff arming them, not calling them back when they call you, and those things, expect them to get heavy handed, but they're not that way. Let them in the door, show them what you got, uh, meet some new friends, You're going to learn from them. They're going to learn from you, and everybody's going to go away. You might have some things to clean up, but it's usually things that are right there in your exemption or in your manual that you just didn't ever read.